Electric Cafe.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. This is video number 3 in my series on my top 100 trance tracks of all time. In this video I'll be counting down from number 80 down to number 71 as we get closer to revealing my top 10 and then my final top trance track of all time. I'm really enjoying doing this series and sharing these tracks with you. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it and hearing some new tracks that you may have never heard, or some classics, and revisit some good memories with these tracks. There's a lot of great memories with these tracks, and whenever I show these, I generally like to talk about where I first heard them and then a little bit about the track and why I like it. But it's always really important to me to keep my memories fresh when it comes to things like your memories with music and where you first heard it and the times you heard it and who were you with and those feelings that you had when you first heard it. That stuff is so important to me. But also from a health perspective too, to keep your memory fresh. And I think of, it seems like dementia and Alzheimer's is such a big reality these days with older people, and that must be like the worst. It must be just a hard thing to go through and to see a family member go through. And hopefully, you guys never have to go through that, and hopefully, I'll never have to go through that. But I think one of the things that we can do, from what I've heard, is from doctors is play, games to keep your memory fresh and revisit memories that you have, and keep your mind active and keep your mind engaged, and also keep training your brain. And that's really important to keep your to keep a healthy brain going. From what I understand, I'm not a doctor or anything, but it makes sense to keep revisiting those memories. And as you get older, your memories are so important. And it's funny when you kind of go through things, different memories, and at the time it may seem trivial and stuff like that, and then you look back 20, 30 years later, and it could be something as simple as just playing a song for somebody, or playing a game with your nephew, or going outside and throwing a ball with your son, or whatever that kind of memory is. And it's just, I've had so many memories in the last couple of years, especially with my father passing away last year, and it's just like, it's great to revisit all these great memories that we have of family members and friends. But yeah, so there's a lot of memories tied to these songs, and these memories, and I always like to show and try to remember where I first heard them, that's a big part of the journey for me, is knowing where you first heard it, and who you played it for, and maybe a set that you played it in, or maybe a special time. And that's what's great about doing this top list, is it gives me a chance to revisit all these tracks and think about all the memories associated with them. And a lot of these songs are from when I was 14 years old all the way to about 23, 24, 25. For the most part, I don't think there's any newer track in this list that's newer than 2001. In fact, I only think there's like 2 or 3 tracks in the year 2000 or after, which shows you my taste in trance music is pretty much all the 90s stuff. But yeah, let's go on to the first track on the list, number 80. So that was number 80 by Laurent Garnier, track called Virtual Breakdown. That was the laboratory mix from FCOM Records from back in 1992. I first heard that on the Universal compilation, this fantastic compilation off Moonshine Records in late 1992, or maybe it was early 93. This compilation was so important for me in learning a lot of European artists at the time. And then later on, I got it probably in '96 on this box set of Laurent Garnier early tracks, and then also I couldn't find my Stronger by Design record that this is on, which I got probably in the later '90s. Um, this was my introduction to Laurent Garnier, who Laurent Garnier became probably well, not probably, he became my favorite DJ. There was a time when DJs were so important, and they still are, to getting into music and finding the music that you like. For me, back in the early '90s, compilations were so important to expand your taste and to uh, find new music and find new labels. Back in those days, there was hardly ever any artists that were having a full album release. It was all, for the most part, they just made one track and it would feature on a compilation, and maybe they had another track and it was on another compilation. But it was rare in 1990, 91, 92 to have a full album's worth of music. Only people like 808 State and some bigger electronic artists had a full album's worth of music to actually put out. And so in those days, it was really important to buy compilations, to see, to expand your taste, to find new labels and find new artists, find new remixes, and all those kind of things. And then as the '90s sort of progressed, maybe by '93, '94, that sort of changed into mix CDs. And I was purchasing a lot of mix CDs through the '90s, and probably once I really kind of going on the internet regularly by like '98, '99, and then of course Discogs by 2001. I pretty much stopped buying mixed CDs by 2001 and finding the actual releases and buying full length, and stopped buying compilations. But I was still, I mean, with mixed CDs, but still buying compilations. But it was so important in those days to find artists and find new music this way by buying compilations. Laurent Garnier was arguably, I mean, this is the first track I heard by Laurent Garnier, so it's a special track for me also. It's strange to even put Laurent Garnier on this list of trance music, but there was some early tracks in '92, '93 that he did that were more trancey. I think I have three or four Garnier tracks on this list. I already featured Moonbeam in my honorable mention, and this track is the first one that's actually on the 100 list. I think there might be just one other track. I think it's coming up maybe next video, if I'm not mistaken. It's in the '60s, if I'm not mistaken, which is my favorite sort of trance track by Laurent Garnier. But again, this is the first time I heard Laurent Garnier, so it's a special memory for me. I got a chance to see Laurent Garnier in concert in, I think it was 2000, on his Unreasonable Behavior tour in Los Angeles, and that was such a great night. And I at the time I didn't know what, it was kind of funny because I didn't know what Laurent Garnier looked like. I think back in those days he had like if you went to his website, he had like you could post like a comment on his webpage, and he would read them and talk with you, not live, but sometime he would respond during the week in general if he had a question. And we were always trying to get him out to America, and he finally came in 2000. And of course, then he had some visa issues in 2003, and he never came back again, which is really unfortunate because he's such a fantastic DJ. There was a lot of issues with DJs coming over in the early 2000s with visas, and that really kind of put a big a hit on the quality of music from underground artists and DJs that were coming in. Just a lot of them was just like, I'm just going to stay over in Europe, and it really hurt the scene. I can think of Laurent Garnier as the main person who, from what I understand, he's never been back since. But I got a chance to see him in 2000, and I didn't know what he looked like. So after the concert went on, I went on stage, and I was talking to this one guy, and I thought he was I thought he was Laurent Garnier, and so I felt so stupid later on, like a couple years later, like actually seeing a picture of him, and I was like, oh, I was talking to the wrong guy. I was talking to the guy who was playing saxophone. So he was the saxophone player on Man with the Red Face, if you know that track. So I thought that was Laurent Garnier because he was also sort of, but in the band, I suppose. But I don't know. I was pretty messed up that night, anyways. But just to go on stage and try to talk to him, anyways. But he was very nice. He didn't really speak any English, and of course, I didn't speak any French really. So it was kind of very kind of just cordial, kind of like trying to be nice, and he was very nice as well. But it was just like I didn't know what Laurent Garnier looked like back then, and that's the funny thing about the early before in those kind of earlier internet days, like and just pre-internet days, you had no idea what these artists looked like, and for the most part, I could show you 100 CDs, and 99 of them won't have a picture of the artist in the inner sleeve or anything. It was just faceless music, and that's why I love that shirt, faceless techno bullocks that Rising High used to do, because it was that kind of stems from like factory records and how New Order put out their music. It was just case in point. I'll just have this right here, just by example. And I mean, I just had to have that, happen to have that. I normally have that framed up. I love that cover, the colors on it and everything like that. Plus, it's important EP for me, anyways. But yeah, in those days, you just didn't know who people were, and it was really exciting times. And there's a lot of great DJs in the early '90s that I follow, from like Kyoki, Sven Vaith, Wes Baum, Mr. C, Frankie Bones. A lot of local DJs like Simply Jeff and uh, uh, Kyoki was a big one in LA. Simply Jeff, I mentioned that. Trying to think of some of my other favorite LA DJs. There was a lot that I can name off, but yeah, DJ Dan was certainly a strong DJ as well. There's a lot of great DJs on the West Coast during that time. Um, Obviously Ron Decor and stuff like that, but Adam X later on from New York, and those are kind of some of my favorite DJs through from like '92, '91 through like '96. And then Laurent Garnier became my favorite DJ around '97, and then probably around 2001 I stopped following DJs altogether, because it just the persona and the egos and the these are DJs who made their career in the trenches, learning the ropes, doing it old school, like I was. Like, you gotta remember back in when I kind of consider myself like the second generation of DJs. Like, the first DJs kind of came up in the very late '70s, right? Of course, there's the radio DJs from earlier, right? But then there's the '80s DJ. I first got my first turntable when I was probably in 1988, when I was like 12. And so I feel like I'm kind of part of the second generation. I learned to scratch, and I didn't really take on to it too well. So I started to learn how to like play music and just enjoy music and play them back to back, and eventually start to beat mix and stuff like that. But that wasn't until like later '90s. And in those days, like, to become a DJ, like like, you really had to know music. That was like a prerequisite. Like, there was no like these days. It seems kind of ass backwards. I didn't expect to get into this conversation, but since I don't have a lot to say about the track, so I'm kind of talking about Laurent Garnier in general because he's my favorite DJ, probably of all time. And back in the days when you learned how to DJ, it was really important um, to learn music and learn the history of music. That was so important. That was like, that was almost as important as the mix CD or mix tape you gave to somebody to try to get a gig. Like, your history was so important. Like, you had to be able to talk it, you had to be able to know it, you had to be able to play it if possible. You know what I mean? Like, it was really important. These days, I mean, it seems like a lot of these people that DJs that get popular, they don't they don't look at the history of music, and they just kind of like, okay, I like this style and let's play it. And they're not into being diggers and finding the history of music, and I think that really suffers because those type of people are just playing the music that's considered now or maybe hip, or it's not tried and true, and it's not, and they don't really understand what came before it. And so if you don't know what's coming came out before it, you're gonna have a really hard time playing music that's timeless. Like the best you can do as a DJ, in my opinion, after everything's said and done, is or if you play a set and you look back 5, 10 years later, is that a lot of your music is still current and still good and still enjoyable. And that happens with that can happen with years of knowledge and history and finding music and discovering music and being able to compare it to what's out there. Like I don't just follow music that I like. I follow even music that I don't like because I need to know which is better, and compare it to what's going on and understand what's going on so I can compare it. And so it's, I've always been the type of person who would be listening to pop radio to hear what's on the radio and be able to compare it to what I was playing. And so you kind of, you have a good idea of what's better music. It's everything's your opinion on what's good music, what's bad music. I get it, but it's I always felt like it's really important to know what came before you, and it seems like a lot of these DJs these days aren't interested in what came before them, and because of that, they play music that's just subpar, and it just is what it is. But yeah, really quickly to wrap up, Lauren Garnier, just my favorite DJ, and in my opinion, he's the one that showed the future of DJing, because he plays all different kinds of genre. That's the future. As much as I like playing techno for an hour or playing deep house for an hour or so, I think Lauren Garnier has shown over the years, I mean, that it's important to be able to play a lot of different styles of music as well. And not only is he very technical and very engaging when he DJs, but he's also about telling a story. His integrity is strong. His knowledge is just unreal. He's still into it. He's still into the underground sound. He's still a champion of techno. He knows his stuff in and out. And he's a talented producer as well. Just a phenomenal DJ with tons of experience and legendary credits as well, and legendary clubs he's played out as well. Just a fantastic DJs on levels. And when I think of the idea of trusting a DJ, Laurent Garnier is a DJ you can trust. Like if you see him on the plaque and he's playing that night, there's no need to go up and watch the DJ play for in a couple hours. Get on the dance floor, go get your friends, go get your lady, jump on the dance floor and have a good time, and don't worry about what's going on in the club. That's the way it should be. That's the way I wish it was. That's the way I hope it'll change. And it'll be about the party, and it'll be about the club, be about the dance floor and the music, and stop watching DJs play and taking selfies and acting like juveniles at an adult party. Sort of rant over there. Anyways, that's my opinion. Rant over. That was Lauren Garnier at number 80 with Virtual Breakdown, the laboratory mix, at a score of 77 out of 100. So now we're into the high 70s. Let's go on to number 79. right, so that was number 79, a track by Space Invader called Let the Energy Flow. This track came out in 1993 on Spacemate Records, which was affiliated with Ryan Beat. I got this compilation back then. Like earlier, I was talking about how compilations were so important in like 91, 92, 93 with finding new artists. Case in point, really strong compilation of tracks from these two labels. This particular track, Let the Energy Flow, love it. Darker, mysterious, sci-fi, great groove. It's got that ravey kind of siren sound in there too. The main melody is kind of eerie and lays the foundation for the piano to kind of do its thing over. It kind of sounds a little bit like X Files theme song. Tight rhythm, and then all completed with a really cool vocal sample with the girl saying, "Let the energy flow." Just such a cool ravey track, nice groovy track. Stays very linear, stays in the sweet spot for the most part, pretty much the whole way, except for that little ravey part. But still, it's still a little bit reserved, and in my opinion, this track still does some damage today. It can be probably put into a Goa trance set or even side trance in some way. It's just a very tight rhythm track and great groove to it, great rhythm. Just an overall really good track that has a great flow to it as well. Um, yeah, what can you say? Space Invader, Let the Energy Flow, with a score of 77 out of 100. All right, let's go on to track number 78 as we count down the top 100 trance tracks of all time. All right, so that was number 78, a track by Ultra High called Primitive Love, part number 1, which was on Force Track Records in 1994. Here's the original album it came on. I first heard it in 1995 on this compilation called Techno Funk. This is a great compilation, by the way, really strong for my tastes, finding some really good techno back in the days. Of course, I was already a big Slam fan, but Slam was on here, even Drexia was on here. Steve Rockmid, Eddie Flash and Folks on here, Ludovic Navari, uh, just some awesome techno artists on this compilation. But yeah, it's funny enough. Like Force Inc. is such a strong record, and I followed Force Inc. a lot through the '90s and 2000s until they split up in and they stopped releasing stuff in 2003. Like I love the Force Track series, their sub label, and also Force Lab series, if you know those. That was even a little shorter lived, but on Force Track they had roughly like almost maybe like 100 records. Force Lab was only like 10 or 15, but I loved all the Force label umbrella music. They're just probably one of the most underrated techno labels of all time, especially in the 90s. Um, I mean, for their 13-year roughly existence, they must have had, I don't know, like 230 records, I think, in those years, and a lot of fantastic German techno. Probably a little bit more associated with techno and even into the trance, probably a little bit more acid trance, um, than what I'm sort of into on the trance side. So Force Inc. isn't really featured a lot on this list. I have two Force Inc. tracks. Both of them are by Ultra High, if I'm not mistaken. This is the second one, Primitive Love. I also featured a track earlier on here called It's Time. But funny enough, I actually like Force. I like Force Inc. Even more for their later '90s stuff when they went into a little bit of glitch and sort of Millie Plateau sound with the glitch, kind of ambient and kind of broken techno, maybe IDM music as well, if you want to call it that, and just a lot of great music they have. But in the early '90s, they were nothing but hard underground warehouse techno and acid. And the great thing about this particular track, the Primitive Love Part 1, is the floating melody. It's still a little bit touchy, a touch ravey, but it just keeps the momentum going. The acid line is so important for the rhythm of the track in here, the groove, and the break part near the ending, which I'm not sure if I'll get a chance to put the whole track in there and to have those parts because I don't want to put the whole 6 minute track in there, but check out this track if you want to see a good example of how to make a rhythmic techno and trance track and keep the energy going and still have a great acid line in it that really supports the rhythm of the track. And then also it's kind of peaky too, so it's a great atmosphere and it's techy along with it, and just the rhythm is really strong and intricate. It's a really well programmed drum machine loop track, whatever you want to call it. And it's coming in at number 78 with a 77 out of 100. That was Ultra High's Primitive Love Part 1. All right, let's go on to track number 77. right, so that was number 77 with a track called Night Flight by Somnambulist. I also, which came out on Ear Records 1993. I did feature the other side of this record as number 99, the track called Deeper Sleeper, which also came on this record. So both sides fantastic on this. One of my favorite Plink Plonk records. Plink Plonk Records, it was also featured on this fantastic uh, was this three part? Yeah, three-part compilation, Parasols Volume One. Wasn't sure if it was two records or three. It felt like three. It's a fantastic compilation by I back man. I collected. I have pretty much all Plink Plonk's records over the years and all the sub labels of Ear and also I'm blanking on the other. There was another sub label as well, which I'm blanking on, but a lot of fantastic trance, a lot of underground techno on this on Plink Plonk Records. Just probably one of my favorite labels of underground of trance of all time. Probably in my top five trance labels of all time, as far as like underground lesser known ones. Um, I love this track because it's so rhythmically acid and dubby and just a great underground sound. Just a really hard acid groove that's just really deep. Um, and the bass line is pure dubby towards the end, just rolls, has a rolling bass line, so unique for it to be acid trance in a way, and still have like a big long bass line like that. Is it's just really a creative track. There's two melodies in the track too. There's one that's sort of spacey that kind of it feels like it's like flying over the track and it covers the main part. But then there's this really kind of intricate, kind of whimsical, almost playful, but it's a little bit eerie, kind of twinkling over the top, and that's mostly towards the end of it. I'm not sure which part I'll put in the edit in here so you can actually hear it. Maybe I'll try to get that point in there if I remember it as well. If you don't know this track, if not, check it out. It's only about a 5.5, 6 minute track. Really cool. Um, but I always really love this track because it just shows that trance can be a very underground sound still. In my opinion, this always was a timeless track. Never goes over the top. Um, it always stays in the sweet spot, and it's still spacey and eerie, and it's just so sci-fi and spacey. It's just so mysterious track, and it's so cool that when you find tracks like this, and they're not by some famous artist, they probably did one album, you know, uh, like back in the days, you kind of like I worshipped artists and labels like this, and I had no idea who they were, but I was just like, oh my god, they did this one track and I love it. Let me look for anything else, and then I could never find anything else, and then I look back 30 years later, and they only ever put out like two EPs, and you just kind of like, it's just a lot of great mystery involved with a lot of early 90s music and finding it and then learning about how these artists made these tracks, if you could find them and talk to them and just for 1 second, 1 year, one record, they just put out this great sound, put all their interest into it and what they were doing and what they thought the scene was. For some reason, never did any other music again, or at least released it. I just find that fascinating, and also like learning about a mystery novel, like reading a book. It's just so exciting, and finding little nuggets like this in electronic music is so exciting. That's what's great about the dig, about finding music and learning about the history of music and where genres came from. You'll don't ever if you're getting into electronic music now and you're finding styles of music and you hear something called a certain genre, like something called trance, like don't just put off the whole genre. There's so much other stuff in all types of styles of music. number 76, track called Beautiful Silence by Resistance D. I first heard this back on Strings of Life album, 1994. Also, it's featured on their Best Of later on in their career. But just a fantastic track, and it makes sense that it was on the album called Strings of Life, because that's what this track is. It says Strings of Life for sure. Gotta love the big sweeping strings in here, and this track is perfectly balanced trance in my opinion. It's nothing. It's got a little bit of groove in there. It's got a little bit of ominous kind of darkness, but it's also got a really nice melody as well. It's a great kind of excuse me, end of the nighter track, just kind of right off in the sunset kind of track. Just leaves with the lasting memory. Really beautiful melody, stays in the sweet spot. A lot of good supporting melody parts along with it as well. Came out on Hard House Records 1994. Just a fantastic track, really smooth and really beautiful track. And let's go on to track number 75. So that was Everything is Under Control on Fax Records 1993 by Sequential, which was Pete Namlook and DJ Chris. They also did some music under Delta tracks as well. Love this track. Even have two copies of it, and of course have the full length album as well. Just a fantastic to play these tracks back to back. So you always have to have two copies. Um, this is a very this is a very personal favorite for me. This is kind of like my this is like an ideal example of spacey trance. It's a great sci-fi sound, mysterious but still uplifting. Got a great tribal rhythm, a lot of great melody parts. It's still tied to techno and rave music in a big way because of all the changes in it as well. It's very predictable on when the changes happen, so it makes it kind of more tied to like the earlier rave sound and just the way people back then programmed tracks. A lot of times they change it, by a bar. I guess that'd be, was it 4 bars or I was like every 16 seconds is, I think it comes to 8 bars or 4 bars. I always forget what it is. I'm blanking on what that is. But you can almost predict that like every 16 seconds, based on the BPM roughly, that there's going to be a big change in the track. That's just how they programmed the tracks back then. It was very predictable, and once it got to that part, it would just things would change, or it would add something. Like here, it kind of gets a little more tribal, and then it adds the rave claps, and I love the rave claps on here. It's always one of my favorite tracks. I just love the cha 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 cha, and it does it like it does it. It uses them like they are claps, and not just like. Well, I like to be honest with you. I like any way they kind of use that particular sound. It's just so ravey, and I love the rave claps. I'm like a sucker for the rave clap. I love it. Um, but yeah, such a great track. Sequential. Man, this track brings back a lot of memories. This isn't the first sequential or the last sequential track. Or I'm sorry, it won't be the first sequential track on this list. Uh, this album. Well, actually, it is the first track. No, the second track. Okay, I'm mistaking. I did feature Saturn Cruises earlier in the list. I think Saturn Cruises was number. I have to look at my list here. Saturn Cruises was number 91. So I think there's two other sequential tracks coming in my top 100. So just a really fantastic trance album. Probably considering I have 4 tracks off this album in my top 100 list. Hard to say isn't one of the best trance albums of all time. Sequential. Love it. Um, and comes in at number 75 with a score of 78 out of 100. All right, let's go on to another classic, number 74.
Okay, now let's get to the real thing.
Getting my groove onto that one. That was Micro Globes, High on the Hope, the long hot summer mix off MFS Records 1992. I first heard it on the old X Mix compilation that Paul Van Dyke did in 1993, back on those X Mix VHSs, which I ended up actually over the years I collected the vinyl. Those vinyl sets, the Ken Ishii, the Laurent Garnier, the Hard Floor, the Paul Van Dyke. I collected all of those at one point, and then in early 2001, I think it was, they brought, or maybe 2002, somewhere around there, they brought them on DVD, and I picked up all of them. Great piece of history right here with these animations to techno and trance music, just fantastic. Very important for the history of electronic music, dance music. This track, what can you say? Just an anthem. I mean, just so catchy. Such a great acid line too, big sounding, but it's all about that melody. It's all about that piano. It's I first heard I first heard this track. It wasn't on this one. It was on a Trezor compilation in 1992, which was strange because I always forget about some of those very early Trezor compilations. They did have some other styles on there. Whenever I think of trance music, I don't think of Trezor music. Trezor label, I always think of techno, but this track was featured on one of their early compilations and this mix. So, which isn't fully surprising considering it's Germany at the time and a lot of great music. And with a song like this, you just can't resist, even if you're not into piano breakdowns and melodic breakdowns and stuff like this. Like, this track is just a winner through and through. Comes in at number 74 with a score of 78 out of 100. That was a Micro Globes, High on Hope, the long hot summer mix. Such an anthem. Let's go on to track number 73. All right, so that was a track called A Source by Red Eye. and it comes in at number 73. Came out on 6 a.m. Records in 1994. Here's a copy with a sticker on it that said "Made in Germany." Of course. Germany, the motherland for trance. This track is so gentle. It shows you how trance can be so much more than just ambient, or so much more than just like techno, or even trance. It's just a transcendent song, and almost feels like it could be really. I mean, it feels very of the time, but it just style wise and what it's trying to do, it just can be a timeless attempt at making anything kind of melodic and just a soothing kind of a gentle track. It's such a great. It's it's almost like a subdued epic to me. Like it just kind of like puts you in such a good harmony, or a good mindset. It's so beautiful. It's just the light breakbeat on there. The melody accents are really beautiful. A lot of supporting melody in there. It almost feels like you're discovering a new world on that track, and it's just so peaceful and unspoiled and virgin, and this track seems so like simple, but it's just so elegant and simple in such it's simple in such a beautiful way, if that makes sense, in such an underground way. I just love this track. And it comes in at a score of 78 out of 100, and number 73 out of 100 on my top 100 trance tracks of all time. Let's go on to the number 72. All right, so that was number 72, a track called Transformation by Transform. Came out in 1993 on Rising High Records. I first heard it on Chill Out, Secret Life of Trance, Volume 2. Uh, gotta love the rawness of this track. It's just so mellow and such a chill out, still a little bit trancy, and it's just so smooth, and it's just kind of shows you how even at such a slow BPM, it still can be considered trance. The acid line in here kind of comes out of nowhere. You don't really expect that, and it's really a unique sounding acid line with the filter. It sounds like they have a filter on it, which is kind of taking out a lot of the low end of the acid line, and so it sounds very unique. And obviously, the catchy vocal is probably the thing that stands out the most, and it still never gets old. You would think I think it repeats itself for like a minute and a half, almost 2 minutes on the track, and it's still you can still sort of tune it out and listen to the other things, and that's one of the great things that electronic music is about. Listening to deeper electronic music when I was growing up, like you were able to focus on things you liked, and you could sort of tune out things that you don't like, which is hard to do in popular music and in a lot of genres. But electronic music, the more you listen to electronic music, the better you become at sort of tuning, focusing in on the things you do like about tracks. I mean, you could not like the track at all, and you're like, oh well, I like how the I like how the percussion, you know, evolves through the track, or I like how the bass line changes in that, or I like the melody accent in that. That's a cool kind of sounding background sample you put in there. Like there's so many things that you can sort of point to in certain tracks and sort of tune out things you don't like. So even if you don't like the vocal in here, which is I suppose could be a little cheesy, you focus in on the rest of the tracks and you don't even really recognize it. Yeah, that's how I was, anyways. I wouldn't necessarily say the vocal makes it or breaks the track for me. Like it is what it is. It's memorable for sure because it's part of the track, but I can totally tune it out and focus on the melody and the little kind of mysterious melody that's sort of twinkling along and sort of as it sort of gets into the track. But definitely a rising high classic. It was featured on so many compilations back in the days, and there's a lot of great remixes of it too, like Irresistible Force. And there's a great chill out remix of it. There's a lot of great remixes on the single, especially the CD single and not just the vinyl single. So if you like this track, check out the other remixes of it. There's definitely something for everybody on the remixes. And yeah, just a classic Rising High track from the year. And man, Rising High was doing so many good tracks, then, or at least featuring so many good tracks. There were some from other labels, and they were able to collect some of the best from Fax Records, and I think it was Injection Records, and just a lot of great labels they were able to pull tracks from. Um, yeah, I think that was about everything I was going to say about that. Let's go on to the last track on the list, number 71, with a score of 78 out of 100. All right, so that was the Space Track by Cosmic Baby, MFS Records, 1992. That's a This is a classic track for a couple reasons. It kind of has the typical MFS kind of bass line for the time. It reminds me a lot of Paul Van Dyke stuff, and that completely makes sense since they're on the same label. But this it's great because the opening melody, you figure it's just going to kind of evolve, and that's a really good melody, and you figure it's just going to evolve and just kind of be that, and then about midway through the track, it just drops out, and a new part comes out, and that part evolves even better than that. I like the second half even more than the first part. And the first part, has a really strong intro, really good opening melody, and again, that's sort of how you figure it's gonna just carry on from that, and it just totally gives into this really kind of great bass line, becomes a deeper groove. The new melody, it's a touch ravey, kind of right in that spirit of post rave coming out of like 1992, and hearing things becoming a little bit more trancey and melodic and more linear, and it's a great combination of techno and trance in here, and just a classic track, Cosmic Baby. One of my favorite MFS tracks of all time. All right, so that completes video number 3 on my top 100 trance tracks of all time. Hopefully you'll be with me next week as we count down from number 70 down to number 61. I'm really enjoying doing this list for you. I hope you guys are enjoying it as well, and learning some new tracks and enjoying some ones that you remember. I think in this particular video that we just had, I was really excited about these tracks on this list, and I really think those last 10 tracks are great examples of some fantastic trance music from the 90s, and hopefully you guys think so as well. And I'll see you on the next video, which will be part 4. All right, thanks so much.